Today, as you can tell from the title, we're going to be doing some sewing. As you can see, I'm in my newly organized and cleaned craft room. By the time you're seeing this, that video will already have been uploaded, so I'm ahead of schedule today. Never thought that would ever happen. But basically, the whole reason that I was motivated to organize and clean my craft room in the first place is because I needed to come in here and make something, and it was an absolute pigsty. So now that that's done with, let's get on with the making, shall we? So here I have some mail that came all the way from the UK, and it contains a 1940's pattern for Cami-Knickers. Now when I bought this, I actually thought that it was a slip. It looked like a skirt, and I believe the Etsy listing said that it was a slip. But as I was reading the instructions, I realized that these are actually like shorts. And I realized that's what Cami-Knickers means. So, two things. Nobody really wears Cami-Knickers anymore, so I didn't realize. As well as the fact that the listing was listed as a slip, I do believe. Oh, and a third thing is this pattern is from a UK company. So, I don't know if we called it Cami-Knickers over here, or if we had a different word for, you know, this particular style of underwear. But, you know, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using this pattern twice. Not in this video. This video will only feature one item being made. But I think I want to use this pattern twice. I want to actually make the Cami-Knickers later on, but in this video I want to kind of mess with the pattern a little bit to make a slip, like a skirt dress slip, because that's what I need. So this is this little outside here. It's like a tri-fold. It's very sensitive, and I feel bad handling it so much. I think I need to make a copy and then use that copy later on. But it has the instructions on the inside, and it contains the actual pattern on the inside. So I'm going to set this down just for a moment and kind of give you a glimpse of what these old patterns look like. So basically they are the same kind of tissue paper that modern patterns are made out of, but they're not printed on. They're actually, they have holes punched in them, and that's how they're marked. So this pattern piece is number 9, and then here's like where the darts are, different notches. And the only thing I'm confused about, because I tried to read the directions to see how this is done, and there isn't anything in the directions, is how you size with these things. So I don't know, these look way too like finely cut for them to be cut by whoever owned the pattern first. Unless they had a really steady hand, I don't know. So because of that, I'm assuming that these were cut in the factory, but there's no like markings that show, okay, if you're this size, cut down to this. So all I have here basically is one size, even though the pattern, it lists what size you are and how much fabric you need in order to be able to make your size, but the sizes are on the patterns. I'm so confused. So here's, oops, this is upside down. Here are the instructions. And like I said, I've already looked through them. They're kind of confusing. A lot of the terms are from the UK. For example, turnings allowed. I had to look up what turnings allowed means. It means seam allowance. Maybe some of y'all knew that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that they call seam allowance turnings in the UK. In addition, a lot of the steps are just kind of like it's really hard to verbally describe how to sew, how to put items together, especially if you're on a very complicated step. So I think a few of these steps they had kind of a hard time explaining what's going on. So I'm just gonna do the best I can do. I don't know if there's some steps that are just too confusing for me to do, or I feel like I could execute it in the better way. I'm not gonna worry about like doing it the way a 1940s person would do it. I'm gonna do it the way I'm gonna do it. So let's get started. I have talked way too long. Most of this is probably gonna be cut out, truthfully. So instead of showing you the items that I got for this, here I'm going to show you me shopping for them. So in the 1940s, a lot of different materials were used for slips, such as rayon, but I decided to go for a 100% cotton muslin just to stick with natural, breathable materials. And after looking at all the different thicknesses and colors of the muslin, I ended up going for a sort of cream colored, thinner muslin that you can kind of see through, but I don't know, it just fit the look that I liked. The pattern also calls for a lace trim, so I headed over to the trim department and looked at all the various different kinds of lace, and I wasn't sure if I wanted a pure white lace or if I wanted a cream colored lace to match the color of the muslin that I chose. So after picking around all the different laces, looking at different colors and looking at different textures, I settled for a 4-foot spool of this floral lace, which in hindsight ended up being a mistake because I didn't have enough and I needed to buy more and still didn't have enough. And lastly, I needed some buttons, so I just went and picked this dollar thing of buttons. Speaking of the 40s, did you see when I indigenized the original 1939 design with Amber Buckanaga? Go check that video out, link below. So because I knew that the pattern pieces were not cut big enough that they would actually fit me, I decided to make a paper mock-up and then use my dress form to apply the paper mock-up and see what adjustments I needed to make. So just popping in real quick, I have done this paper mock-up, which came to my surprise that my daughters fiddled with this. So when these pieces were the right size, I was like, something is wrong. And yeah, so I readjusted my dress form. Again, I'm assuming my daughters messed with it. But for both, let's see, they're obviously, I mean, it's a commercialized pattern, so it should be accurate, but as you can see, these sides like match up. So I am missing about 4 inches altogether, so that would be 2 inches on each side without the seam allowance, aka the turnings, according to the English. So if I include the turnings on the bodice, it would be about 6 inches. Well, for both, actually be about 6 inches all together. And then I think what I'm going to have to do is split that 6 inches in half. There's 2 pieces on the bodice, so it would be an extra 3 inches to figure out for each side. So an extra 3 inches on the side of the top, and then extra 3 inches on the sides on the back. And so I'm assuming that would be about 1.5 inches on each side of each piece. Hopefully that made sense. This is why my ribbon skirt tutorial, I'm like divide by 2 and then divide by 2 and then divide by 2, because it helps make sense of how to figure when you're working with 2 sides on 2 pieces. So the bottom, on the other hand, is actually made up of 4 pieces. So we have the center front and the center back, and then there are the back side and the front side. Now again, this pattern is of Cami-Knickers, so there's supposed to be like a bottom. There's 2 gusset pieces that form a crotch basically, and I'm also going to have to alter the bottom, like the hem of these pieces, so that they can be wider. And I think I'm just going to do that with the center front and the center back, just to make up for the lost surface area that the gussets provide, because again, I want a dress slip and not something that's like shorts or knickers, whatever you want to call them. So I think that this paper mock-up really helped me get a visual of what I need, because your girl is thick. And yeah, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually measure out what I need, potentially make new pattern pieces with this pattern paper that I have. And then, I don't know why I'm doing this. And then once I make the pattern pieces with the pattern paper, then I'll go ahead and cut out the fabric, and then we can get started on the sewing. Here I'm adding 2 inches to the front bodice piece. So after children and kitties got bored with me, I traced the center back piece with the original fabric and then extended the edge by 2 inches, making it slightly wider, I believe 3 inches wider at the bottom, and then forming a new line on the edge, and then putting the old pattern piece back on to remark the notches. I'm repeating the exact same steps with the front center, and keep in mind that the edge that we're adding 2 inches to would be the outer edge and not the center fold. I added 2 inches only about 1/3 of the way down, and then after that I added 3 inches at the hem and then connected the dots, and that was just to make it wider at the bottom so it can form a skirt instead of just the knickers. And then adding 2 inches to the back bodice piece. "14 minutes in and we're finally sewing. So I have to create darts out of the front bodice piece. So I'll be remarking the darts onto the fabric using a marking pencil. First rule of sewing is you should be ironing as often as you sew. Next, I need to put in the darts in the back bodice piece. Again, with that marking pencil, just tracing the dart markings from the pattern. Next, the pattern calls for using French seams in order to stitch together the side seams of the back bodice to the front bodice. French seams are done by stitching the pieces wrong sides together and then folding it inside out and stitching it right sides together. This catches the raw edges inside of the seam so that there's no need to fray block afterwards. Now that we have the bodice put together, it's time to add that top row of lace trimming to the front and all the way to the back bodice piece. And they said to do that by only stitching the bottom of the lace and not the top. And you can do that either by hand using satin stitching, or you can do that using machine stitching, which is what I'm going to do. So they said to do that by placing the lace so that the top of it is about a ½ inch away from the raw edge, and then clipping the fabric away close to where you just stitched so that it only reveals just the lace with no fabric behind it. But I don't like still having a raw edge, so I'm going to actually roll the fabric in on itself so that it's sort of like a rolled hem, but at the top. And I actually rarely pin my fabrics together if I'm just sewing in a simple straight line like this. So yeah, I'm not pinning the lace to the material, I'm just putting it on there, eyeballing it, and sewing it down. I will, however, pin down a rolled hem because as much as I love rolled hems, they're a pain in the butt. Time to set the bodice aside and work on the bottom. So we need to stitch together the center pieces to the side pieces on both the front and the back, and they also call for French seaming those as well. And then after that, we'll be able to attach the bottom to the top. So when sewing the bottom portion, I forgot to leave open a placket, so I had to rip open the side seams. And the instructions, like I said before, they're kind of confusing, and I was supposed to leave an opening on the side seam of the bodice as well to leave the placket. If you're wondering what a placket is, it's just a small opening so that the garment will open up enough and you can actually get it on. And this particular placket will be closed using those buttons that I picked up. But before moving on to forming the placket, I need to stitch the bottom layer to the bodice. I don't know why I always think that I'm gonna finish something in a day, and I never do. It's about 9:30 at night. My back is absolutely killing me, and I'm still not done with the slip. I have most of it done here. I'm currently working on the placket. Again, like I mentioned, I need the placket or else I'm not going to be able to get the slip on. And then what I need to do after I finish the placket, including, you know, sewing the buttons on and sewing the buttonholes, is I need to make the straps and then attach the straps to the dress and then hem it. There's actually nothing in the instructions about hemming. I'm assuming, so on the picture it has lace on the bottom, so I'm assuming they want you to do it the same way as the top. Yeah, they want you to do it like the top. However, out of the lace that I had, and doing only one line on the bodice instead of two, this is all I have left. So I think I'm gonna break for the night. I am super tired and there's still a lot to do, and there's no way I'm gonna be able to get through this tonight, because like not only is it late, but when I get this tired I start to sew and figure things out way slower and I mess up more. So I will see you tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow. For you it's gonna be like right now. Good day. It is a new day, the sun is shining, and I need to cover up these raw edges of the placket. The instructions simply just said to add an extra piece, so I just cut out two rectangular pieces, one slightly wider than the other, with the wider one so that I can sew some buttons on it and it'll sort of underlap the other one perfectly. And before I sew these pieces to the actual slip, I'm just ironing these edges flat so that they'll be easier to work with. Oh, and I folded them in half and ironed them that way too. So first I'm starting by attaching the placket that's going to be sitting on the top. This placket will have the buttonholes, but the fabric on the other side isn't wide enough for the buttons to reach directly underneath that placket. So I'm extending this one outward a little bit, just enough so that it can lay directly underneath the other placket, but still be able to catch the fabric that I'm attaching it to. Then once I stitch that same wide placket piece on, then I'm going to reconnect it to the bodice piece so that it all joins and lays nice and flat together, just like so. So here is their placket, and here is my placket. But something that I noticed that is not in the instructions is that I'm not a huge fan of this seam allowance here. The instructions just say to overcast it, so basically you just do a whip stitch on the ends to fray block. I mean, that's something that you do by hand. If you don't want to do it the way that they say in these 1940s instructions, you can do a quick zigzag stitch on the ends or use like any other sort of fray blocking method that you have. I don't know if pinking shears work on such like a loosely woven fabric, but there's that. But I just don't like how it's prone to flapping anywhere. So I think I'm going to do a quick top stitch just all around the whole bodice here, and hopefully it doesn't make it look ugly. Yeah, I'm not sure why the hem came out so uneven. I'm assuming maybe it had something to do with shorts, but anyway, I'm just mapping out how long I want these straps to be, and the pattern wanted them to be more outward, but I decided I wanted them inward, so I matched them up with the darts. And then with my marking pencil and allowing for seam allowance, I marked where I wanted to cut, and then for ease, I just lined both straps up and cut them at the same time. And then the next step is to fold each strap in half and then stitch each of them about 1/4 inch away from the raw edge, only on the long side and not on either short side. And it should come out looking something like this. Now we need to turn this inside out, so clip off the excess seam allowance just so you don't have too much bulk inside. Now to turn the straps, I'm using a great big yarn needle and some thick thread and feeding it through at the end of the strap, which this can leave a big gap in your material, so if you don't want that, use a smaller needle. And then I'm taking the ends of the thread and tying a knot to secure it at the end of the strap. Then I'm inserting the needle into the strap and then feeding it all the way through the strap. Once I get the needle all the way through, then I'm going to be using the needle and thread in order to sort of get the strap to fold in on itself and then pulling one end all the way through to the other. Essentially pulling the strap right side out so it forms something like this. Don't forget to give your kitty some some scratches. I don't believe the pattern said to do this, but I wanted to do it anyway. I just went ahead and did a quick top stitch on both sides of each strap. Now to actually attach the straps, I'm finding the top points of the bust area, and that's where I'm going to be applying it by turning the edge in on itself just to protect the raw edge, and then stitching it securely onto the bodice. I'm also doing a quick stitch upward on the strap, catching that lace just to keep the lace forming a point. And I repeated similar steps for the back attachment of the straps, just by stitching a line at the bottom and then stitching straight up onto the strap in order to catch the lace. Now to fix this wildly uneven hem, I'm just going to be cutting one panel at a time, essentially tracing the shorter side. Now, as you may recall the lack of instructions for hemming in this pattern, I did figure that it probably had to be done the same way as the bodice, where you only attach the one side of the lace and then cut off the excess fabric so that it's only the lace peeking through. And then what I did was roll the ends of the fabric so that it formed sort of a nice hem instead of just a raw edge. But if you may also recall, I also didn't buy enough lace, so I took a quick squash soup break and then deliberated and decided that I am just going to apply the lace to only the front using a zigzag stitch on the end, and then continuing to zigzag stitch the back of it just to keep an even hem. And then the timeline goes like this: decide where the buttons go, mark where they go, cut the holes, turn on your friend's YouTube live, stitch the buttonholes, and then stitch on the buttons. And here is the finished product. I hope you like it. I really do. Again, this was made out of an original 1940 something pattern. I don't know the exact year. I just know it was sometime in the 1940s that this pattern was made. And the pattern came from the UK. So yeah, I am actually wearing this as I'm currently speaking. It's so comfortable. I ended up not actually even needing that placket because it's wide enough to just slip right over me. So I think the next time that I use this pattern, I'm going to make it the same size but not mess with the placket at all. So yeah, I hope this was entertaining, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, Guaman.